Let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, God, we are so thankful for the gathering tonight, and we thank you, Father, for the way you continue to favor us by way of your faithfulness, your Spirit, the many friends that we have here, Lord, people that pray for us and that are our friends, Lord, through thick and thin, that care about our nation, Lord, that care about other ministries, that stand in the gap in varieties of ways. Lord, as we're here tonight, I pray that you will just renew hearts and minds as they think about their country, they think about their communities, they think about that which perhaps they can do to lend a hand in one way or another. And we pray tonight that we'll even have some ideas and some thoughts that may resonate within them, that they will want to pick up a hand or whatever it is that they can do to assist one way or another. Father, bless this time now, we pray. For we ask it in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, everybody. Now a Q&A. Dick, thank you very much for coming down from Detroit.
Okay.
Dick is a person that came out of Washington, D.C. And so, Dick, just very briefly, you do a very good job in being brief about some things, but talk about a little bit of your background and where you work downtown so that people have a flavor of the fact of your career.
Well, thank you. I appreciate people coming out and being hosted by this very, very productive group. I'm very impressed with all that you've accomplished in your interactions, and we had this interview with Sandy Rios, so you're bringing me into another world. I'm just a citizen. I'm retired. I grew up in Washington, D.C. Just my family lived there. It was a very interesting place to work, to go to school right by the Capitol, and worked for the federal government for 15 years. And then worked for private industry. It's interesting to live in 9 different states. You get a different perspective. You come to Michigan, and Michigan is quite its own state with its own characteristics. It's a lovely place, and we like it very, very much. We've lived in Texas and California, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Maryland, and a few other places, I think. So I'm just a person who got interested in this subject and got actually pretty impacted. So I'm a student of people like Steve Coughlin, Phil Haney. Phil Haney's become a great friend on several levels. There are people like Steve and Philip who are experts at this and can trace the history and can give you chapter and verse. They're extremely verifiable. They're so careful. The notes and the bibliography for that. And I want to mention that when we get into the presentation, I have met another man who's very, very unique, and I'll just take a moment. We're talking about Sharia crime, because there's a gentleman who is a retired lieutenant colonel from the U.S. Army, 45 years in military and civilian law enforcement. He was a command officer in sheriff's departments in the South, and he was a chief of police. He's the kind of a person, when he retired, he made his life's work to prepare to fill the void. The void is that local police are not trained. And we're going to talk about why that is. It's absolutely the case. All over the United States, local law enforcement does not know what Sharia is, does not understand honor violence. They do not understand a term I'm going to explain that they all need to understand. That term would be no-fault rape. This is very difficult material. This is women in Sharia primarily. Just to get right to the point, women in the room are not equal to the men in the room. So under Sharia, every woman in this room is treated as some man's property, as a child, as a little girl, as an adult, as an elderly woman. We're going to go into all of that. This gentleman, the police chief, was horrified by the fact that his staff, the people in the sheriff and the county office and the other people he knew across the South, were not getting trained. And he knew a lot about this because he'd been associated with military police. If you remember, Fort Hood was a disaster, and this affected him. He went into a period of time where he's got 24 hours of material, not for me to teach or work with you on, but for police to hear from police. So this man's singular goal in life is to have every chair in this room filled with police officers, women and men police officers carrying their weapons and their radios, fully equipped to wake up every day and risk their lives. He knew that they were at risk because they didn't know about what we're going to talk about. So he's built the material. He's trained 150 police jurisdictions in 6 states in 1, 2, or 3-day classes to educate them on the topics. I'm going to talk about one topic, and I'm going to talk about it at a very high level. I'm not a policeman. I could not train you if you were police. So the goal is very simple. In your handout, you'll see a piece of paper that says Sharia Crime Stoppers on it. On that piece of paper is the call to action. Those are questions that citizens like you can ask your son-in-law, your brother, your granddaughter who happens to work for the police department. So it's an individual conversation between an individual citizen and an individual policeman. Ideally, that would work to the point where multiple policemen would discuss the questions, perhaps leadership. The problem we have is if you start at the top, and that's the Department of Justice, and you go to the FBI, and you go to the people that train local police, and you go to the police chief, and the police chief maybe works for the city council, who might be progressive, potentially. The policeman who took an oath does not have the equipment to do their job. So the call to action is very simple. We're going to talk about why those questions are relevant, and we'll go through some examples in the presentation. I just wanted to kind of get to the punchline. The goal is here is to educate you, but you know what? You probably have some of this education. It's really for you to have enough information to have a conversation with your friendly law enforcement, the brave people. So we're not complaining about the police. They're brave. They just don't have the training. We are going to talk about the leadership that's gotten us to the point where they don't have the training. It was a little bit long. I'm sorry.
That's right. Dick, so one of the things that you living in Detroit, one of the things that we wanted to bring out quite early as well to sort of set the pace as well, so that people, as much as we possibly can, we're wanting you to have a sense of the vulnerability of the people. You know, we hear a lot about Dearborn and Hamtramck, don't we? Yeah, we hear a lot about it, and that we're concerned about what we're hearing about that. We hear about things like sanctuary state, sanctuary cities, that sort of thing. We'll ask a question about that at some point. Yeah. But I want you to talk about that meeting that you recently went to with the FBI and others. Please explain that. I'm
actually going to use a couple of slides to answer that. That's a great. So the FBI is in the business of keeping us safe, and they speak to people around the country in enforcement. You might know this person. This is Leo Holman. Leo Holman has documented the invasion of refugees and immigrants into America. He calls it stealth invasion. It has to do with Sharia. It has to do with, so in Sharia, you are challenged to move from your home to another country to install Sharia. That's the whole point. And it has a name. It's called Hijra. That's what the book is about. He wrote an article a couple of weeks ago. The FBI takes on Islamophobia, and while white nationalism is seen as a bigger threat than jihadism. We know about this article because we're in the article. Why is that? Because we got an opportunity to sit in a meeting, the 64th meeting since 2000, since 9/11, many years ago. The FBI has been meeting quarterly with the Muslim community, the Muslim Brotherhood in Michigan. That's what they do. And in that meeting, I got to attend the meeting. I took notes, and I had to make a major decision about whether to share them with Leo Holman. We made the decision because it's so important. So here's the story. This woman, a very attractive young woman, I explained it. If you thought of Debbie Reynolds in a hijab, she's bubbly, she's charismatic, she hugs everybody, she's quite a factor. If she was in this room, you would notice her, etc. So before the meeting, she's just a person in the room. In the room, by the way, are 80 people. About 65 of them are from the Muslim community. We identified, we know there's Muslim Brotherhood people in there because we know CARE is in the meeting. The Muslim Brotherhood, I think you all know, CARE is an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial, which had to do with money being given by American charities to Hamas, to terrorists. The Muslim Brotherhood is in the meeting, and the FBI, the head of the FBI for the southeastern region of Michigan is there. The brand new U.S. attorney, just assigned by Jeff Sessions a week before, is in the room. I didn't know who she was, well, all of a sudden she's the speaker. And her topic is cultural education. So she proceeds to explain, I got the slides, I'm going to use them. So instead, this is an FBI opportunity to talk to the community about what we're talking about. Instead of that, the floor goes to this woman who is a hijab-wearing apologist for Islam. She actually said, there's nothing to worry about. Jihad is really, it's overblown. Don't think about terror. Forget about all the things you see in Europe. Jihad is just inner struggle. There are policemen in the room from Troy, and the mayor of Troy is there, and she is getting applause for all of these deceptive remarks. She says, jihad is inner struggle. My jihad is I eat too much cheesecake. And they're promoting this. This is the message. This is the FBI. She also proceeded to say, you know, this Allahu Akbar thing is really overblown. You people probably think that people say that when they kill people. She said, that's just a greeting. If I had a baby, somebody would say to me, Allahu Akbar, it's just a greeting. And she said that, and then she proceeded to, this is from Leo Holman, she debunked any derogatory information that the police officers might get about Sharia or about Islam. That was her message. She sat down, and all of the FBI people applauded. Okay, so this has been going on. This is the second meeting I've been to. We made the decision that we needed to tell somebody, so we told Leo Holman. He wrote the article. The article, if you look up Leo Holman, Hohmann, you can read the article for yourself.
And he used to write for WorldNet Daily.
He used to work for WorldNet Daily. His words are that this is the same dribble that's filtered down to police departments nationwide. That would be a police department in Fremont or Grand Rapids or Oakland County Sheriff. This is a very significant problem. No conversation in training police. So in 2011, Robert Mueller, you've heard that name, was visited by the Muslim Brotherhood, as well as other leaders. He's the head of the FBI at the time. In 2012, Obama pulled the trigger, and a whole bunch of organizations, including Steve Coughlin's Department of Defense, dropped any reference to Sharia, jihad, honor killing, child brides. Anything that has to do with Sharia was removed.
And the training manual.
In the training manuals of police. And why did that happen? Should I keep going just briefly? All right, this is why. Well, the answer is the Muslim Brotherhood didn't care. Well, how did this happen? We got off on the wrong foot. After 9/11, the president went up to the microphone after spending time with the gentleman in the box. That's one of the founders and national leadership of CARE. His name is Nihad Awad. He's right behind the president when the president said Islam is a religion of peace. Well, obviously, they were talking before he came to the podium. This has been in the works for a while. This is two days after 3,000 Americans, exactly like you, men and women, were killed in 9/11. And the most important thing to do was to protect Islam and say it was a religion of peace, and then 2 weeks later to send the FBI to meet in Dearborn so that we wouldn't hurt Islam. So watch this face. There he is. This is 16 years later. This is last year. Nihad Awad is in the middle of a picture. He's at the ISNA convention. ISNA is one of the Muslim Brotherhood front groups, just like CARE. They were also an unindicted co-conspirator. The woman on the left, her name is Linda Sarsour. You may have seen her. She is a mouthpiece from the Muslim Brotherhood. She said there should be jihad declared against Trump. She's a feminist. Somehow she's connected herself as a spokesperson for women without ever saying anything about women being enslaved under Islam. So she has a special role. She gets the VIP treatment because she is a symbol deceptively. Anyway, watch the guy in the middle. He is the head of CARE. Now he's the head of CARE on the left-hand side. He's still the head of CARE. In the middle, two over, is Dawood Walid. He's the head of CARE Michigan. So now we're bringing it home. Happens to be Jesse Jackson. But on the right-hand side is a gentleman we probably don't know. He is a past president of CARE Michigan and on the board of this CARE Michigan. Why is that important? Look at his face carefully and then look at that face. Look at her face and look at his face. This is the father of this woman. She is a Sharia-compliant doctor. She went to the University of Michigan where she met the man on the left, the man on your left, which is, his name is, anybody? His name is Abdul El Said. He's running for the governor of Michigan. This is the glossy magazine in Detroit. For him to get front page coverage, his run is for real. They're convinced it's a real campaign. He really has an opportunity to win. So it's interesting that by the way, Abdul, this is why it affects everybody in Michigan. Part of an answer to your question, governor of Michigan is the governor of West Michigan and the governor of Southeast Michigan. This gentleman was the vice president of the Muslim Student Association, one more unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land trial. So he was the vice president on 700 campuses around the United States, many in Michigan. There is a Muslim Student Association. They are teaching Muslim students Sharia, but they're also drawing in non-Muslim students to understand this mythical, in college campuses, Islam is cool. The hijab, you'll see that in a minute. But he was vice president of the Muslim Student Association. So he is directly connected to the Muslim Brotherhood, and his daughter couldn't be more connected than she is to the Muslim Brotherhood. And so here he is with, of all people, Linda Sarsour. So my point is, this is a real candidate for the governor of Michigan. So when we talk about Sharia bills and it being pervasive and growing, there's a real challenge here. Linda Sarsour invited everybody at the ISNA convention to recognize him, have him stand up, people from all over the country. She asked them to all send him money for his campaign. It's public information. We have the first 3 months of his campaign to raise money. He raised $1 million. When you look at the list, you see lots and lots of doctors from all over the country and many people from the Middle East. So clearly, this is a national campaign, and it's something to be recognized that we have candidates in Michigan who are, I'm not sure how seriously they take Abdul, but we take him seriously. And fortunately, we are working with candidates who understand Sharia and are working to learn more about Sharia, and we appreciate that. The significance of this for all of the people in West Michigan is, on day one, which was February of last year, he announced that he's left of left. He's left of Bernie Sanders. His mother is a covered woman, American woman, convert, his stepmother, and she is a very leftist part of the Bloomfield Hills, and she's been very, very aggressive on the school board there. He's left of left, but he wants single-payer insurance, but most importantly, he wants to make Michigan a sanctuary state, like California. Now, if Michigan is a sanctuary state, that means that law enforcement would be prohibited to enforce immigration laws. If you do not enforce immigration laws, you are separating yourself from the American Constitution. You have just declared yourself in willful violation of the Constitution, and therefore you are a lawless community. Well, we think, and Sandy Rios picked up on this in the interview, it's a facade. If you can make a sanctuary state out of Michigan, the Constitution is really not that important anymore. It's probably pretty easy to introduce and make Sharia acceptable. Remember, Sharia, which we're going to talk about more precisely, is the Constitution given from God. This is Allah's Constitution. It takes precedence over any man-made constitution. So Abdul and his wife, as Sharia-compliant people, they believe that Sharia should overthrow the U.S. Constitution. So sanctuary state is a stepping stone to Sharia. I should probably stop now.
That's important that you had that train of direction that you took there. It's very helpful. Now, in terms of the issues going back a bit to your area, there is this great vulnerability over in your area, and not just Dearborn or Hamtramck, as we've stated. What are some of the concerns there that are arising that people like you are becoming aware of, that law enforcement is basically standing down on?
Well, and again, so for example, let's just tick it off. We have an honor killing right 20 miles from my house. The town is called Farmington Hills. Farmington Hills is.
What is honor killing?
Honor killing is the story of that particular case. There's a woman. She's dead. She's 39 years old. She's married to a man. The family has a teenage boy and 2 teenage girls. They go to a mosque in Canton, Michigan, and all of a sudden she's at the bottom of a second-story window, dead. Initially, the police thought that she fell. It was an accident. Then the police thought that she'd been pushed out the window. and he died there. Now we're finding out that the evidence, the third wave, is that she was dead on the second floor, and somehow she ended up out the window and down below. Well, she and her husband, they both have a Sharia background. On the other hand, she's in America. She sees freedom. She sees women. I think she's, she may actually be a fitness instructor. I'm not sure about that. But she and her husband are going to get an American divorce. Well, remember, under Sharia, the woman has no rights in divorce. A man has 4 wives, and he can decide today, wife number 2, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you. Just says it 3 times. She's divorced. She leaves the home. She can never see her children. She has no property rights. She doesn't leave with any. It's totally different. In this case, the husband and wife were going to do she was forcing an American divorce. The husband had been cited repeatedly for violence, so he had a track record of domestic violence, which is still different than honor violence. They were going to have depositions the next week. So it turns out she's dead, and it turns out that the police have identified the fact that the 15-year-old son killed the mother. That's it. And they've said that they are not investigating any other suspects. Well, it's the wrong thing to do. We have a whole presentation on honor violence. We'll jump right to it. Honor violence means that shame has been brought to the family. So in Sharia, Sharia has a couple real trigger points. Sex is a big problem in Sharia. It's a twist. It twists people around. We'll talk about that. Honor is another one. So this woman or any young girl who runs away or a housewife who wants a divorce, they're bringing shame on the family. By definition, if shame... Higher. That would be one way, sure. In this case, trying to get an American divorce would be that. So yeah, examples like that. By the way, it's a great point. We have a slide. Over 90% of the reasons why women are killed is not for sexual impropriety. It has nothing to do with affairs. It's 90% is because they're too westernized. They have Western friends. They wear Western clothes. So anyway, it turns out that the police have said that they're not investigating anybody else. Well, if you have a background in Sharia, you know, of course, the father was prohibited by the restraining order from visiting the son. He broke that repeatedly. So he's been putting into the head of the son the whole notion of honor, etc. So if you understand honor violence, you investigate the father. If the case of a young daughter who was killed, the mother knows about it. The cousin she was supposed to marry, in the case of a young girl, he knows about it. The imam knows about it. It's a family decision with the blessing of the imam in the mosque. This is Sharia. If you bring on, if a 15-year-old girl brings dishonor to the family, it says right in Sharia, the law, that the father and mother are sanctioned to restore honor to the family by removing the reason of the shame, which is they can kill their daughter. So in America, we have laws. We don't need a whole lot of new laws. It's murder to kill a mother or murder to kill your daughter who is becoming westernized. It's just murder, and you need to enforce the law. And you need to realize that there are other people involved in the crime, not just the 15-year-old boy. So that's an example of what we're dealing with. We have a FGM case that the whole world is watching. Why do we have an FGM case 15 years after the federal law?
FGM, there might be some that don't know.
Female genital mutilation. So female genital mutilation is part of Sharia. And we have reasons why it is. There's been a federal law since 1995, I believe. Never been an indictment in America. How could that be? There are studies that say 500,000 women have either had FGM surgery or are at risk.
Just 1 second, too. How many of you know what FGM is? Okay, a good share. Can you just, in a very, there's some younger people here too, just sort of give a simple definition of that, although it's not a simple thing.
It's surgery to impair the woman's ability to participate in adult sexual activity, and it is it's a bloody surgery. So you probably followed this story. My point is, we have one federal indictment. It's in Michigan. The children were brought from Minnesota. So what does that tell you? First of all, we're not doing a whole lot of investigating of FGM. We've only got one case, and it took the federal government to do it. And this is So part of the message here is if there's that, and it's, people know all over the world, FGM is done all over the world. It tells you that there's a whole lot of secrecy about that in America. Step back for a second. Why does Michigan have the problem it has? And the answer is largely because of the Sharia compliant, 50 years ago, onslaught of educated medical doctors from the Middle East. You can't get away from that.
They came to the Detroit area.
I'm sorry, yes, to the Detroit area. Keep reminding me. So in Southeast Michigan, many people go to doctors that are from the Middle East. These are either originally came to America with an education, got a license, and are practicing, or they're the second or third generation of a family of doctors. Well, if you're a family of doctors and you come to America, you have a lot of money. Democrats love you, Republicans love you, you're appointed to boards, commissions. You own the biggest MRI company in Southeast Michigan is Basha MRI. Mr. Basha is a Sharia-compliant member of the Muslim Brotherhood. We have checks. He has written checks to the prominent Republicans in Congress. So we know that it's a medical community that's rich enough to bring impact. They send their daughters and sons to medical school, probably sons more often. And they're important parts of economic development. The governor loves them. People love these people. Unfortunately, they're still Sharia compliant. They're on the boards of mosques. So we go back to FGM. For all those years, when FGM was happening in Michigan, there's no indictments. And now there's one, and people are watching it. Now, part of the defense, they've got an all-star defense team. I think maybe Alan Dershowitz is one of the people. They're going to claim that this lady is innocent because it's a religious practice and it's protected. Well, if that's a religious practice and it's protected, then so is pedophilia and no-fault rape and the other things we're going to talk about, because they're all associated with the word Sharia. And
Dick, now then as we think about what is the culture that's developed in that side of the state, and we become moving towards a sanctuary, the sanctuary state if Michigan moves that way, and even if they don't, that is on the move. And so you're talking about if there's a concern or a complaint in your neighborhood, or of a girl or somebody, and you want to go and you want to tell somebody, and it's a law enforcement official or a sheriff or a state trooper or whatever, what's going to happen with that complaint?
Well, so again, I want to give full credit to the police chief who's given us all this material. So he goes into great lengths to ask the police in the room at the beginning of the class and then at the end some of the questions that you have in front of you. If you were what guidance would you, as the police chief, give to your community as indicators of a young man who's becoming radicalized? So when we say radicalized, we really just mean people are becoming more fundamental. More fundamental means you follow Muhammad. Muhammad was not a nice guy. Muhammad personally supervised the beheading of 800 Jews. That was his first big episode. And then he taught his generals all of that. And so the notion of, we've got no-fault rape, honor violence are terrible crimes. The monster crimes are mass murder, jihad. And we know that there are people who are in America, that might be the 15 or the 25-year-old son, second generation. Mother, father came over, they really liked America. They might not have been too consistent at the mosque, but they made sure their 15-year-old, from the time he was born, was in the mosque. The imam becomes almost a second father. Well, the imam, 80% of the imams are trained in Saudi Arabia. That's called Wahhabi Sharia. That's very, very aggressive Sharia. So the 15-year-old's been going to the mosque, and he's learning he's learning how to treat women, but he's also learning about jihad. And so you have this radicalization process. So the police chief would ask police, if somebody asked you to give them 10 indicators of radicalization so we can cut this off before we have a catastrophe, what would you tell them? Well, the policemen don't know. And so as we go through the presentation, if we go through the class, I can show you real quick, if that's okay. This training, this is the kind of things he trains people in. And one of the topics is radicalization. So this is a 2-day class. I sat in it. It was in Alabama. 60 officers were there. I've never had an experience like that in my life. I like sitting in the chairs with you, listening to Steve Coughlin. That's fantastic. But I got to say, if you were sitting one person, if you were in a room and all these chairs were policemen, and they were learning what they don't know, wow, you get a feeling this is what we're supposed to do. We have to fill this void, because I left that training thinking, oh my goodness, this is as important, and to me personally, more important than going to Lansing and knocking on a door and trying to get a legislator to pass a law. I'm saying there are brave people who, through no fault of their own, don't know how to do their job that they took an oath for, and so this training is covering these topics, and one of the topics is radicalization. Back to the questions. Policemen don't know how to teach you what to look for radicalization, and they also don't know what would they do if somebody came forward and said, I think we might have an honor killing instead of a domestic violence. And so he works on that. The other thing to keep in mind is, I will bet most of you, we watch Law and Order over and over again. It's a great program, right? Law and Order is law and order. It starts with a crime. You know there was a crime. You see the crime. Then you watch the investigators wrestle with the crime. Do we have enough to bring it forward? Then they have to get to the prosecutor to get the prosecutor to understand, and a lot of times the prosecutors send them back, go get more evidence. Then they go to a judge, then they go to a jury. Think about that. If all those components are ignorant about Sharia, how hard is it to get an investigation, an honor violence investigation? How do you then go to talk to the prosecutor who doesn't want to hear about Sharia? He might be running for attorney general. So how do you have a prosecutor who knows enough about Sharia to say, you know, we have a good case. It is honor violence. It's not domestic violence. There's 4 people to indict, not 1. And then you've got to have a jury, citizens, peers who understand enough about Sharia to not be impacted by the defense that's going to come up from Alan Dershowitz. How could we even talk about this? How could we ever be in any way ask questions about Islam? It's a religion, just like Christianity and Judaism and Islam and Buddha. Well, the answer is anything that is religious is protected by the First Amendment. So if you go to Sharia and the imam says, this is how you pray, that's protected. This is how you fast, that's protected. These are the holidays we're going to celebrate. Those are protected. That's a minority, maybe 15% of Sharia is related to religious practice. 85% of Sharia is related to your behavior on these subjects. So Sharia sanctions violence against women, after all, their property. It sanctions polygamy. It sanctions pedophilia. That's called child brides. If you look at this list, these are behaviors for which existing laws and the U.S. Constitution exist. This is not protected by the First Amendment. Every one of these are crimes today, even though people on the left love Islam. You have women who are using the jihad as a fashion statement. So despite the fact that women are the victims of many of these crimes, we have this problem in America of people that don't want to deal with it and want to protect it under the First Amendment, when in fact it is not protected by the First Amendment. This is crime. This is criminal behavior. This is what the imam teaches in the mosque. This is what the 15-year-old son. Unfortunately, it's what the 15-year-old daughter is exposed to as well.
I wanted to just switch because you've talked with me about this. One of the concerns that, and a lot of times, people just out in, well, most any place I would imagine, but certainly our side of the state, they don't recognize the whole matter of submission, in a mall, like you state that so well. Explain that, would you?
So there's something attractive about Islam. There's something when you give a woman just a small sliver of Islam, and oh, by the way, if it comes from a tall, dark, potentially handsome guy with a big car on campus, these women are all the wives of one or more men. And we've actually had a covered woman come to one of our meetings with I'll just say, American Midwestern face in a hijab. So this whole notion of Islam is cool is a problem. I'm going to apologize. Give me the direct question. Let me try to answer it directly. Sorry, give me it again.
Basically, you speak about like when you go to the mall, and there is a woman that's dressed in the hijab,
right?
And what does that represent to a man, and what does that signify to the rest of the world?
All right. Okay. Thank you. And okay, so this woman is a former Muslim woman. Her name is Ayan Hirsi Ali, and she's talking about the veil. By the way, she's also has had FGM and talks about that. And her comment is, the veil deliberately marks women as private and restricted property, non-persons. So a woman either wears it because she's submissive, or she's afraid not to, or she's misguided. I don't think most of those women from the college, they're all about college. In college, you either study women's rights or a few other topics. Even if you're a math major, this is what you learn about. So for them to be worried about women's rights and then put themselves into this symbol of enslavement is a problem. I think what you're referring to, whether I can find it immediately or not, here we go. In Islam, if you are covered, you're free. But you're only free from sexual harassment. You're not free. If you're not covered, then we'll tell that story. So, for example, I live in a town called Rochester Hills. Nice place to live. Been there about 10 years. You know, women go to the store, they go to the mall, they're dressed like women in here are. All of a sudden we see, let's just make an assumption. Okay, there's two women in the back of the room and they're covered. Well, covered women are enslaved in Sharia. They don't just go out by themselves. There's a man that they are the property of. So he's in the room somewhere. Because there's two covered women in the room, then the attention is on all the uncovered women, all of you. Because if you're not covered, it is sanctioned. So uncovered women are marked as sex slaves. In this man's mind, in Rochester Hills, when two women he's associated with are in a mall with uncovered women, those uncovered women are immediately in his mindset sanctioned by Sharia to be sexually harassed and or raped. And this is the way it works. This is from, I believe, the Quran. I'm not sure. O Prophet, tell thy wives and daughters that they should cast their outer garments over their bodies and be not molested. In other words, if you're covered, you're not going to be molested. If you are uncovered, you are sanctioned as a potential target. The reason I make the comparison with you would never think of that, except all of a sudden now you see 3 covered women and a bunch of children shopping where you shop. You know, certainly, by the way, I want to make a comment. This is usually individual Muslim people are to be loved as we love all people. We're not anti-Muslim. We were identified today as an anti-Muslim bad person. We're not anti-Muslim. We could not be more anti-Sharia. The problem is Sharia. So these women are enslaving themselves either because they can't get away or they choose to. They are property, and this notion about not being covered. So just so you know, it turns out that when women are not covered, they're frequently the target for attack, either sexual attack or actually mass murder. So this is a list of places where jihadis had gone out of their way to attack and kill women who are not covered. So if you're not covered, you're not Sharia, you're an infidel, and one way to terrorize women and the men that love them is to rape them. Okay.
Dick, we're going to, in just a couple minutes, I'm going to open this up for just a couple, for about 3 questions.
Yeah.
And then we're going to swing back.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, Steve, you got one of the microphones, and I've got. Tim, would you take this other one? And so, if you have a question, please raise your hand.
Do the children of the Muslims always follow this that they've been taught? Or since they live in the United States and they see what we think is the freedom that women have, do they desire that?
That's a brilliant question. So what happens when this very 7th century mentality comes to the freest country in the world? And the answer is, if they assimilate, which would mean they would move away from Sharia, they can be killed. It's called apostasy. So they have to run away and not get returned by a misguided policeman. Yes. To be free, the women have to leave their children, leave every piece of clothing they have, anything they have, and leave and run away. Just so you know, there's a woman named Farah Prudence. Farah is a former Muslim converted to Christianity. She's 39 years old. I've interviewed her. She's a very courageous woman. She has a fatwa on her head. A fatwa is a death sentence. So one of the things the imams do, in addition to teaching children about Sharia, if they have they want to make an example out of it, they will issue a death sentence on a person. Well, she has a death sentence on her because she left, and she left as an adult. So there really, I'm not trivializing it, but people study Scientology as a cult that people can't get away from. Well, this is a real cult. This is so much like a cult that it's so unlike a religion. And while we give it credit for freedom of religion for 15% of it, majority of it is inhuman, barbaric behavior for women and children. And the answer to your question is, if they try to get away, they're subject to being killed. And the killing, again, if they were in a Sharia court, would be sanctioned. By the way, it's also blasphemy. What I'm doing is blasphemy. There's a death sentence for that. If you were sitting, I live near Canada, so where we live is 30 miles north of Canada. And we've had Canadian people come in to sit and listen to us, coming up to us and say, if you were 30 miles away from here and you said all the things you just said, which is what we're talking about now, you would be arrested for hate crime. And the people in the audience who didn't get up to leave would be probably identified as haters as well. So you're all well aware of the branding. Hate is in. And you can throw the word hate around, particularly helpful if you put a name in front of it like Southern Poverty Law Center identified anti-Muslim hate group. That works, and that makes all the people who could think critically, they just jump right to it, hater. So the real target of hate, in my opinion, we call them white supremacists. I mean, that's what they're called, right? That's the new buzzword. The new hate word is white supremacists. Well, what does white supremacist mean? No, we're not that. We are not that. My point is, that's the charge. We're called Islamophobes. We're called racists. We're called white supremacists. We are not any of those things. My point is, there's a manufactured industry to split the country, and it's very, very effective. The other group that is targeted for attack, of course, are people who follow the Bible. So. Right.
But also, just to let you know, because of the interview, the interview that you did for those minutes with Sandy Rio.
Wednesday. So what happens when you get on these hate lists is that you get phone calls unsolicited from the newspaper. We're doing an article on the 20 hate groups in Michigan, and we see you are officially identified. It's like, if you remember, there used to be you'd get an award, like a blue ribbon. You've been identified as a hate group, and then they throw a question at you. Well, we don't entertain those questions. If you've got a person that's going to put an adjective string in front of your name and just acknowledge without questioning it, of course you're a hater. What do you think of this? So we don't do that. It's important to understand that there's an industry. The Southern Poverty Law Center are two rich guys. They make incredible amounts of money through donations. I think they received over $50 million last year because they identified haters. And they don't do it with any careful. They do it according to the agenda. They're funded by people like George Soros. They're very wealthy. So I guess I just want to make the point. We talked for 20 minutes. This is interesting. What was the 50 minutes? So in the article that said we were an anti-Muslim hate group, they had a 53-minute excerpt. And the only topic they covered was 53 seconds. I do that. Thank you. Right. The only guy they covered, it was this comment. And what they said was they wanted people to know, and that was their headline, that in our interview, we somehow said that sanctuary state was really a sneak attack to get Sharia to be more acceptable in Michigan. That's what they covered, which I know you know Dave Agema, and Dave Agema has a sentence that says, if you're taking flack, you know you're over the target. Well, I guess we hit a nerve. I guess there's people in the left who really want Abdul to win, and they don't want anybody to take a leftist topic like sanctuary or DACA or Dreamers and connect it to something that might be sinister like Sharia. So that was what that was about.
And then there's the ABN network that's going around the world now, and that started over by Detroit. Aramaic Broadcasting Network, and they exposed Sharia and all the Islam laws and everything that goes with it. We used to listen to it when we could get it in Michigan, but now we can't anymore.
Okay. Pamela Geller hosted an event in Garland, Texas. You know, this is America. If we want to draw a picture of Muhammad, a happy picture, a sad picture, we can do that. We can draw a picture of the Pope. We can draw a picture of any of you in the room. It's called freedom. We have freedom to do that. And so she hosted an event just to point out that they could do that. And there were 2 jihadis that came from Arizona to attack. So they did put a fatwa on her. So people are attacked because of individual animosity. So a fatwa is a pretty serious subject. And your other question, ABN. I believe they broadcast into the Middle East. One of the interesting things about living in Southeast Michigan, and my first exposure, we're talking to people who speak Aramaic, which of course was the language I believe that Jesus spoke. And so we have Chaldeans, we have Assyrian Christians, we have an interesting collection of Middle Eastern Christians in Southeast Michigan. And we've actually went to one of their events where they were raising funds to do their broadcasts into the Middle East. Think about this, though. These people are committed to freedom. They understand Sharia, and they're trying to reach out to make converts in the Middle East. Think about this, though. We can't get into Canada. So we could put broadcasts from right here. We could be broadcasting this right now into Canada to try to reach people because we can't go there. I'm just showing you how careful we have to be and watch. We still have freedom of speech. If the presidency had gone the other way, I don't think we'd be in the room today. So we have just a limited amount of time, including, I don't think these meetings will occur. If this man is the governor next January, I don't think we will be having meetings like this. So we don't have a whole lot of time, and that's one of the reasons, again, I'll put my little plug in. We are looking for people who will look at these questions, which we're going to talk about in a bit. We need to get individual policemen to get the training because, again, there won't be a lot of Sharia training coming into Michigan next year if this is the governor in January.
Bringing their laws to
That's Hijra.
us to take over and overstep our laws.
That's 2 different things.
Jihad.
So jihad is 9/11. Jihad is mass murder of people who are not Sharia. If you're not Sharia, they call you an infidel, and they are sanctioned and encouraged to move Sharia forward by any means possible. You can do that by terrorizing a country and killing 3,000 Americans in the towers. That's jihad. So jihad is happening every day all over the world. Hijra, Hijra, Hijra is another word. Hijra is picking up your family from the Middle East and moving into Southeast Michigan with your family and other people to build mosques to spread Sharia. So that's a second way to spread Sharia. You don't have, by the way, I believe this is true. Your reward in paradise, you will go to paradise for Hijra. So if you're a little bit afraid and you don't want to put bombs on your body and blow people up for jihad, which is the fastest way to get immediate acceptance into paradise, you can take a little longer and just move your family and create Sharia in a foreign country. You will still go to paradise for that because you are promoting Sharia. And keep in mind, paradise is a big deal. It's another unfortunate connection to sexual activity, but that's what's in their head. So there's tremendous motivation to either blow yourself up or migrate and install Sharia in a foreign country. And remember, it's only temporary that you accept the culture and the civilization and the constitution of the country you move to because you believe in Sharia. And you believe that's Allah's law. It's God-made law. So, of course, whatever law, no matter, even if it's a really good constitution, law set like we have, it has to be replaced because it's man-made. So it may take 5 years, it may take 20 years. By the way, this is called civilization jihad. If you elect governors and legislators, by the way, there's a woman running for Congress, the 11th District, who is a Sharia-compliant woman. There's a woman in Arizona who's running for the U.S. Senate. There are probably 200 well-known Sharia-compliant people running for office in America in primaries this summer and in November around the country. Keith Ellison, you might know Keith Ellison. He's the number 2 man in the Democratic National Committee. He's a congressman now from Minnesota. So this is a very serious attempt. Infiltrating the FBI is one thing. Infiltrating the political system is another. We want the country to know about this guy because we want the country to understand that they probably have candidates they haven't even paid attention to. And if you live in Oklahoma or Texas, and Michigan has a Sharia-compliant governor, and it's a sanctuary state, I think America just got broken. You don't really have America. I don't think Texas wants to be in a country that has a state that would do this.